It was supposed to be just another corporate gala. Wine glasses clinking, polished shoes on marble floors, laughter echoing through the glass atrium of Zenith Corp's Manhattan headquarters. Everyone in their tailored best rehearsing smiles and shaking hands like chess pieces on a board they didn't realize they were standing on. And then he said it. Julian Royce, the CEO with the silver tie and a jawline cut from ambition, stepped onto the central stage. He smiled, tapped the mic once, and said with perfect calm, "Tonight I want to play a quick game of chess. With someone special." People chuckled politely. A few executives raised their glasses. Then he gestured toward the back of the room. And the room went still, because through the crowd stepped a woman no one expected to see under the lights. Not in that setting. Not at that hour. Her name was Delores Green, 63 years old. Wearing orthopedic shoes, a faded burgundy cardigan, and a janitor's badge that still hung from her pocket. She didn't belong in this room, at least not according to the people inside it. But there she was, walking past stunned faces, past hushed whispers, all the way up to the board Julian had set. She didn't ask why, didn't flinch, she just sat. He offered the first move. She declined, and with hands that looked like they had folded 1,000 fitted sheets and scrubbed 1,000 tile floors, she moved her knight. The CEO smirked, the crowd snickered, phones started recording. But Delores, she leaned in slowly, met his gaze, and said with a voice soft as smoke, "You've already lost. You just don't see it yet." Before she was the woman in orthopedic shoes, before she scrubbed glass doors and emptied trash bins at Zenith Corp's 64-floor tower, Delores Green was something else entirely. Back in the late 70s in a brownstone on Lenox Avenue, she was known in Harlem as the chess girl. At 14, she was beating grown men in parks. By 17, she had taken the New York City Youth Chess Open with a checkmate that made the paper. She didn't brag, didn't boast. She just played. Chess was how she made sense of a world that rarely made sense to her. When her father left, she played. When her mother worked double shifts at the garment factory, Delores set up her little board by the window and studied endgames until midnight. She was smart. Too smart, some said. Smart enough to win a scholarship, smart enough to leave, but she didn't. At 22, she gave birth to a daughter, Naomi. By 26, she was a widow. Her husband, Darnell, a sanitation worker with a laugh that filled rooms, was hit by a delivery truck on the corner of 148th and Malcolm X Boulevard. That day, the board flipped, and Delores never played competitively again. She took a job cleaning at a nearby hospital, then a school. Eventually, she landed part-time work at Zenith Corp, the job no one sees doing work everyone steps over. But through it all, she raised Naomi with the discipline of a grandmaster. No TV until homework was done. No quitting just because it got hard. And every Sunday, no matter what, they played chess on a wooden board Darnell had carved by hand. On the bottom, in shaky lettering, he'd etched, "For my girls, so they never forget what power looks like." Naomi grew up to be brilliant, a coder, a builder, a breaker of patterns and solver of systems. By 27, she was working at the same company her mother cleaned for Zenith Corp. But she never told anyone about that connection, not once. Because Naomi knew in that building you got judged by your resume, not your roots. As for Julian Royce, he'd seen Delores only once before. Late one night, 2 months before the gala, he was passing the 30th floor employee lounge when he saw her wiping down tables. There was a dusty chessboard left behind. She paused, looked around, then carefully set the pieces back into place. Not randomly, but in a position. The opening to a famous 1983 Soviet Blitz match, the Rubinstein Trap. He didn't say anything that night, but something about it stayed with him. Not just her knowledge, but the way she moved the rook like it mattered. He started researching her. Then he found Naomi's name buried deep in the system logs, tied to a critical security patch that prevented a cyber breach last quarter. She had submitted it. Another man had taken credit. Julian didn't fire anyone, didn't confront anyone. He had a different idea. Let the mother make the first move and see what the rest of the room would do when power didn't look the way they expected. The moment Delores sat down at the chess table, you could feel the room lean back in disbelief. It was a custom oak board, hand-carved heavy, the kind of thing you'd expect in a private club or a governor's study, not in the middle of a corporate gala, and certainly not beneath the calloused hands of a cleaning lady. Julian Royce smiled with practiced ease. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet my opponent, Ms. Delores Green. She'll be playing black." Naturally, the joke landed sharp. Some laughed. Delores didn't react. She adjusted her chair and cracked her knuckles like she was about to mop the floor, not the board. Phones came out. One VP leaned over to his wife, smirking. "This'll be good. Maybe she'll clean the pieces after." Another exec, sipping wine, whispered, "If she wins, I'll clean the entire East Wing myself. Swear to God." Laughter rolled across the atrium like spilled champagne. Fake, loud, pitying. Naomi stood near the back, still in her navy work blouse, still unnoticed. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes begged her mother not to go through with it. But Delores didn't even glance her way. She was already focused. Julian made the first move, pawn to d4. Bold, predictable, showy. Delores answered quietly, knight to f6. The board spoke in silence. The crowd did not. A junior manager, young, cocky, half-drunk, muttered near the dessert table. "How much do janitors make anyway? Is this like a charity stunt?" No one corrected him, not even the HR director. Naomi wanted to disappear. She thought about walking out, about dragging her mother with her. But something kept her frozen. Maybe it was the way Delores sat. Calm, upright, steady. As if the board wasn't just a game, but a battlefield she'd been training for her whole life. Julian moved fast. He smiled a little too wide. His bishop sliced across the board. His queen danced. He was putting on a show. People clapped after each of his flashy moves, not even realizing he was overextending. Delores took her time. She played slow, deliberate, like she was folding laundry between every turn. And the crowd got bored. The snickering grew again. Is she even trying? She looks lost. Poor lady. This is just embarrassing. Even the DJ lowered the music so the tension could breathe louder. But Delores didn't flinch. She reached for a pawn, tapped it twice, then moved it forward 2 spaces. Simple, unimpressive. But Julian's smile faded just a bit, because he recognized that pattern. It was familiar. Too familiar. Across the room, Naomi finally exhaled. She knew that move too. It was one her mother had taught her at age 7, how to bait a bishop into overreaching, how to draw the queen into a trap disguised as a weak flank. But the rest of the room didn't see it. They saw only a janitor's mom pretending to play among titans. And they laughed again. Because in their world, power never came wrapped in worn sweaters and dollar store shoes. Not yet. Julian Royce leaned back in his leather chair, smug and relaxed, swirling a glass of Pinot in one hand and controlling the center of the board with the other. To the crowd, he looked in total command. And Delores, she looked still. Not nervous, not angry, just still like a pond waiting for a breeze that would never come. She made no eye contact, no small talk, only chess. Her fingers, marked with time and detergent, moved each piece as if she'd known it since birth. No wasted motion, no flair, no hesitation. Just precision. At move 17, Julian tried to trap her bishop. She let him. At move 23, he captured her rook with an eager grin. She didn't blink. And then she did something odd. She moved her queen. Not to attack, not to defend, but to wait. The crowd didn't get it. Julian didn't either until his brow creased ever so slightly. He looked down at the board, then up at her. She finally met his eyes. "You think I'm playing to win?" she said quietly. "I'm playing to teach." And with that, she moved her knight. A soft clack. That one move changed the tempo of the game. A few people watching, those who actually knew chess, leaned forward. One junior developer mouthed, "Wait a second, is that—" Someone else whispered, "She's forcing tempo." Because what Delores had just initiated wasn't random. It was the start of a strategic sacrifice, a cascade of positional traps that looked like carelessness to the ignorant, but brilliance to the trained eye. Julian paused for the first time, longer than he should have. He looked at the board, then at her, then back again. His jaw tightened. She was baiting him. Piece by piece, he fell for it. He took her pawn. She smiled. He advanced his queen too soon. She rotated her rook into place like a door quietly locking behind him. "Check," she said. Laughter died instantly. The atrium, once buzzing with background music and champagne, went silent. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights. You could hear someone put down their wine glass too fast. You could hear Julian Royce swallow. Delores sat straight, calm, steady. She didn't celebrate, didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She simply waited. Naomi, still in the back, covered her mouth. She had seen this exact position before on Sunday mornings, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, while her mother taught her not just how to win, but how to stay underestimated long enough to strike without noise. This wasn't just a match anymore. This was a message. Sometimes Delores said softly, "You don't need to be loud to be heard." Julian adjusted his cufflinks, his face flushed beneath the stage lights. He tried to move fast, hoping to recover, but it was too late. The crowd, once amused, now watched in growing awe. She hadn't said a word in 20 minutes, but every move she made screamed. "You judged too soon. You laughed too loud. You never saw me coming." Move 29. That's when it ended. Julian Royce leaned forward, sweat just starting to form at the back of his neck. His tie, once perfect, now looked like a noose pulled too tight. He stared at the board, calculating. But there were no more moves. Not for him. His king was cornered, trapped between two pawns, a bishop and the queen he hadn't seen creeping up the back rank. He ran the scenario twice. It didn't matter. "Checkmate," Delores said as softly as if she were handing him a folded towel. The room gasped. Someone dropped a fork. Someone else clapped once, then stopped, unsure of the etiquette when the cleaning lady's mom defeats the CEO. Julian sat back in his chair, blinking. "That was impressive," he admitted. She simply nodded. "I've played that ending before," she said. "A long time ago, when people didn't think I belonged at the board then either." He chuckled awkwardly, trying to shift the attention back to himself. "Well, it's not every day I get checkmated by a—" He stopped himself. Too late. Everyone heard it. Delores let the silence hang. Then gently she turned her eyes toward the audience, toward someone in the back. "Naomi," she said. Heads turned. Naomi Green took one step forward slowly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, Mama." Delores nodded, then looked directly at Julian. "You said the winner could ask for one truth." He swallowed. "Yes. Then I'll ask this. Did you ever find out who actually stopped the data breach last quarter, the one your team bragged about at the last investor call?" Julian froze. A few eyes shifted toward the executives along the wall. One of them, Carl Denman, head of IT, suddenly looked very pale. Delores continued. "Because I know someone who worked 3 nights straight writing the patch, who submitted the code, signed it, time-stamped it, and watched it get buried under a manager's name." Now the room was dead silent. Julian turned toward his assistant and whispered something. She opened her tablet, typed fast, then stopped. "Sir," she said quietly, "she's right. Patch 6.3.2. The override script, it was submitted from Naomi Green's terminal at 2:16 a.m. But the commit ID was overwritten the next day. By Carl." Carl stammered. It was a team effort." "She didn't." Julian raised a hand. He stared at Naomi as if seeing her for the first time. "Why didn't you say anything?" Naomi looked him straight in the eye. "Because women like me don't get second chances after being called difficult, and black women, we barely get the first." The words hit like a slap. Not loud, not theatrical, just true. Julian looked back at Delores. And for the first time that evening, his face lost its mask of confidence. "You weren't here to beat me, were you?" Delores shook her head. "No, I was here to make sure you saw her." Across the room, people stood frozen, some ashamed, some stunned, some changed. One by one, phones were lowered. Eyes turned from the board to the woman who had been invisible behind it for years. Naomi stood beside her mother now, not as a background figure, not as a forgotten coder, but as the center. "She taught me the game," Naomi said. "But life taught me how to survive it." And Julian, he stood, cleared his throat, and spoke not to Delores, but to the room. Effective immediately, Naomi Green is promoted to lead systems architect. She'll receive full credit for all contributions retroactive to Q1, and starting next week, she'll be sitting at the executive table. A beat. Then he turned to Delores. "And if you're willing, I'd like to invite you to lead a mentorship seminar, Strategic Thinking Under Pressure." Delores looked at Naomi. Naomi nodded. Delores smiled. Only if it's on Sundays. That's still chess day. The next Monday, things felt different at Zenith Corp. Not louder, not dramatic, just quieter. Like a storm had passed through and left behind something cleaner. Naomi Green now had a nameplate outside the office that used to belong to Carl Denman. It didn't say diversity hire. It didn't say lucky break. It said what it was always meant to lead systems architect. And beneath it, in tiny engraving, she added herself. Taught by a queen. Delores didn't return to her janitorial shifts, not because she quit, because Julian wouldn't let her. He called her 3 times before she agreed to anything. When she finally did, she had one condition. If I'm going to teach strategy, she said, I'll teach it to the ones who've never been invited to the table. High school interns, entry-level techs, custodial staff, mail room, the overlooked. Julian nodded. Deal! So every Friday at noon, the 29th floor glass conference room filled up not with suits and ties, but with kids in oversized polos, women in sneakers, and immigrants still mastering their second language. And at the head of the table, Delores Green. With the same old wooden chessboard her husband once carved set at the center like a crown on velvet. She didn't lecture. She played. She taught people how to think 4 steps ahead, how to read a room like a board, how to protect what matters, even when you're holding the smallest piece. Some folks couldn't quite process what had happened at the gala. In the break rooms and elevators, you'd hear things like, "Did you see that chess game? I didn't know she was her mom. I didn't even know she could play." But the whispers didn't sting anymore. Because respect once recalibrated doesn't fade, it spreads. By the end of the month, 2 other coders, both women, both black, got recognized for work they'd long gone unnoticed for. A young HR associate started a mentorship program, and someone taped a photo to the bulletin board near the staff kitchen. It was grainy, a little off-center, but powerful. Delores leaning across a chessboard, eyes focused mid-move. Underneath it, someone scribbled in Sharpie. You don't need a title to move like royalty. For Naomi, life changed too. Not because of the title or the paycheck or the office with the city view, but because for the first time in her adult life, she no longer had to pretend her mother didn't work here. Now, when she passed someone in a blue jumpsuit or mopping a hallway, she didn't just nod politely, she stopped. She spoke. She asked about their kids, their weekends, their dreams, because power had shown her its truest form. Not a corner office, not a stock option, but a woman in dollar store shoes who could see 10 moves ahead. And Julian, he changed too. Not overnight, not completely, but sometimes you don't need a full transformation. Sometimes you just need a crack in the armor. He started asking more questions in meetings. He listened longer. He stopped assuming that the loudest voice in the room was the smartest. And on one rainy Thursday afternoon, long after most people had left, he walked into the 29th floor lounge, sat across from Delores, and said, "Teach me the Rubinstein trap." She smiled, opened the board, and said, "Only if you promise to lose again." He laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't fake. On Sunday morning, the sun broke gently over Harlem. In Marcus Garvey Park, under the rustling elm trees, a small folding table stood between 2 wooden benches. No red carpet, no audience, no stage lights. Just Delores Green sitting across from a 12-year-old boy in a too-big hoodie, fidgeting with a knight in his hand. He'd never played chess before. Didn't know how the bishop moved. Didn't know that the queen could cross the board in one breath. Didn't know that a pawn, if it keeps moving, can become anything. Delores didn't teach with rules. She taught with stories. This piece here, she said, pointing at the pawn. Looks small, disposable. People overlook it, but it's the only one that starts moving and never moves backward. That's why it's the most dangerous. The boy looked up curious. "You ever win with just pawns?" She smiled. "Oh, honey, I've won with nothing but." Back at Zenith Corp, her name would become a quiet legend. Not because she beat the CEO, but because she showed them all what strategy looks like when it's rooted in patience and pain and power that doesn't have to raise its voice. People thought the story was about a chess match, but those who really watched, those who really listened, knew better. It was about every person who's been underestimated, dismissed, talked over, passed by. It was about the janitor who understands systems better than the manager. the mother whose silence hides a lifetime of genius, the daughter who carries brilliance quietly waiting for the day someone finally sees her. In life, some people are born with queens in their hands. Some of us are handed pawns. But if we keep moving forward quietly, deliberately, without apology, one day the whole board changes. Have you ever felt underestimated, but proved them wrong with your actions? Drop your story in the comments below. Someone out there might need to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet power inside us all.